Today I'm going to be taking a look at the TCL SVC200 action camera. This is a small 1080p action camera that bears a striking resemblance to a certain other action camera from a large consumer electronics manufacturer. More on that later on. But I'll say this here and now because I know people like things kept simple. This is definitely the best £100 action camera that I've tested so far. There's links to buy it in the video description from both eBay and Amazon. Now, £100 at the time of going to press is 160 US dollars or 170 Australian dollars or 3.4 million Vietnamese dong. Now mine came in a cardboard box like this. I've seen some others advertised with a clear window on the side. Pretty sure it's the same camera though, just different packaging. The specs are on the screen now. If you want to read those, I suggest you pause the video because I'm not going to go into any detail on these just to make the video a little bit short, although as you can see it's getting on in length anyway. The major features of this are that it goes underwater in its own waterproof case that comes with it. It's got a 170-degree wide angle lens. It's got a screen on the side, a 1.5-inch LCD screen, and I think that's it actually. Let's go through the box anyway, let's see what we've got here. Well, the camera's in the top there, in that little bit. It all comes out. This is all the stuff inside it. Everything you need to get going apart from a micro SD card really. Let's go through these things. Well, of course, you've got the camera to start with. We'll talk more about that later. There's the case as well. Then we've got the USB charger, and I've got an adapter so I can plug that into a UK plug socket. There's this kind of mount here, very useful this. I attach this to the motorcycle helmet, but it's also got a strap on it, which you can remove if you want and attach it to other things. A couple of different adhesive backs for that, to reuse that once you take it off something. A handlebar mount, which is quite nicely made as well. A normal USB A to mini B lead. We've got a remote control as well. That's RF, not infrared. This little cradle thing which attaches to the windscreen suction cup so that you can use it as a car camera. And we've also got the battery, of course. They keep that separate in the box. You just put it inside the camera. And as I mentioned before, you'll need to supply your own micro SD card. I'm using a nice Class 10 one in mine. So here's the camera. Let's just have a look around the buttons and things. You've got 4 on this side. You've got 2 on the top and then a slider switch, which is another one, I suppose. At the front, you've got a photo. Middle is the record on off and the back is the power. Little LED at the back there as well. On top of the camera, at the front here, that hole there, that's the microphone. And of course, you've got the lens. And underneath there, there's the speaker. Not much going on this side, really. On the bottom though, notice we've got a standard tripod screw on the actual camera itself. That's very good. Now on the back, this is where things get a little bit clever, because inside the rubber bit here, we can lift that up. That is the microphone socket, 2.5mm, and the USB plug. So you can charge it and use the microphone without taking the back off. But if you want to take the back off, just open that little bit there, drops down. As you can see here, there's a USB microphone and the HDMI on there. Micro SD card next to the battery there. The battery slides out like this. It's got a little bit that holds it in place and then the battery slides out. Apparently this battery is a standard Nokia size, so you can get spares of those. In my test, I got about 2 hours 15 minutes out of that when I was recording in 1080p 30 mode. It just pops back in there in that spring-loaded slot, and then you move this little sort of metal bar across and stick it under that bit there. Stops the battery wobbling about inside the camera. We've had some other cameras recently where the battery sort of wobbles and you can hear it on the soundtrack, but not with this one. So there you go. Let's just show you the buttons on the top for recording and things. Well, we'll press down that one there. That should turn it on. See, TCL comes on the screen and we're off and running now. We're in standby mode. As you can see my hand on the left there on the screen. So let's get it recording. Slide the yellow switch forward, the slider. You can see the red dot on the top of the screen there, showing that the camera's recording. And if you slide it back, it stops recording. Pretty simple, really. The front one's a photo button. Every time you press that, you'll take a still photo. So the only question that this leaves is when does that LED come on at the back? Because it wasn't lit there when it was recording, as you can see now. What happens is the screen will automatically switch off after 3 minutes, then the LED comes on instead to show it's recording. So let's just go forward in time a little bit. As you can see there, we've got the timer on the screen, 2 minutes 56 seconds. So when we get round to 3 minutes, the screen will automatically go off on its own and the LED takes over to show that it's recording. and touching any button will turn the screen back on. Now the first thing I want to show you is how the camera coped on my motorcycle helmet. Notice I've got it attached to the side here using the supplied mount, haven't used the waterproof case, that's so I can plug the microphone into it, and I did get the angle a little bit wrong, so all the videos are slightly slanted, but you'll have to bear with me on that. Now another thing to mention, the video bit rates for this camera, you can set these very high. I always set things to maximum, but on this camera maximum might be a little bit too high because it goes all the way up to 18 and a bit megabits a second, which my video editing package and perhaps YouTube and things might have a bit of trouble transcoding. So if you notice any jerkiness at all, download some clips, because the clips that I recorded aren't jerky, they're silky smooth and look excellent. So let's have a look at some of them. Okay, so this is the first fine weather that I've had for weeks, and I've been able to get out on the bike today. It was raining this morning, but it's cleared up now. You can see the road's still a little bit damp, and of course, with it being autumn, there's quite a lot of leaves to look out for as well. There could be some skiddy patches. But overall, nice afternoon, really. The real reason I'm talking to you now is to demonstrate the microphone on the camera, how it's got a mic in socket on the back, and you can plug in, as I have done now, a condenser microphone. This is the condenser lavalier microphone I reviewed a while ago. I've just shoved it inside the helmet. It's going to be getting a lot of echo on this, a lot of sort of mumbling, maybe wind noise as well, because I've got a bit of a slightly open-faced helmet. But the fact that this camera has a 2.5mm mic in socket on the back is a major plus, because not many cameras do. So this is a first for me in trying to record live video and live voiceover at the same time, whilst of course trying to breathe and also trying to think about what I'm talking about. So if it sounds a little bit rambling, that's probably because I'm concentrating on not going over 30 through this speed camera at the moment. Now you can see the sky over there, that looks that's a bit black, doesn't it? So hopefully it'll stay dry long enough for me to make the, I don't know, 10 mile or so journey I'm going to be making now. Right, so halfway through my trip out, I stopped off, got a few things in a shop, put the camera back on the helmet a bit straighter this time, and turned it to 720p 60 mode. So let's have a look at a bit of that footage. Okay, so far, a bit of a successful journey this, so let's hope that the sound's coming through okay. Alright, next left. How's this one? Yep, fine. Oh, might end up going on the motorway here, you never know. So you can see from that I've got quite some way to go before I can become a successful moto vlogger. But anyone wanting to try it out can now do so for a new low price, because this camera, with its 2.5mm mic in socket, enables anybody with £100 and odd to get the camera and a microphone and get off and running and try moto vlogging out for themselves. Now, I didn't really get a chance to show you that mount properly before I stuck it to the helmet, because I had to get out of the house in a hurry because it was a sunny day. It's rather similar though to the handlebar mount that I'm showing you here, except the bit that goes around the bar, instead of having that bit on it, it's got a sticky back bit. But the top bit's the same. It's got this same sort of clicky mechanism here, which you can tighten up. And of course, we've got this bit that screws into the tripod screw hole, and then it's got a rubber plate on the top to stop it spinning around. While I'm showing you the mounts, I might as well show you how the camera would fit inside the car if you were using it as a dash cam. Now, I put it upside down like this in my video. You'll notice the clips have all been flipped over and the timestamps the wrong way up. But really, you're supposed to use this thing that comes with it. The camera slides into that. That bit screws into the tripod hole at the bottom, and then the tripod screw hole on the suction cup can screw into the one on the top. And of course that means then that the camera is the right way up when you stick it in your windscreen. The only issue with that is that it does wobble around a little bit, as you can see here. So I didn't use it in that, but you could put some tape around it or something just to make it a little bit thicker so it doesn't wobble inside there. Now notice these two ridges on the side here that are clearly designed for something to sort of slide into them from the bottom and clip up to the top where the car gets out. Those are also on the side of the waterproof case, as you can see here, both sides. Now, there's nothing in the box that attaches to those, so I'm not sure what those are for. I think there's a mounting system that they haven't supplied, or maybe that didn't work out for them. Anyway, about this case, we've got a glass lens on the front. It's quite nicely made. It's very strong feeling. We've got the tripod screw on the bottom again, which is another good idea. The button on the top here to start and stop the recording has a nice click on it and locks in place at either end. So you click it like that and it just stays there. Now we'll just put the camera inside the case and show how it operates. So it's got this sort of usual clip at the bottom that opens up like that. The door has got a nice seal around the edge and a spongy bit on the back there to stop the camera rattling around. Now notice the switch. It goes up and down, as you can see, but it doesn't go inside the case. The case is waterproof, of course, so nothing can go through it. And somehow that switch operates the camera, even though it doesn't go inside the case. I'll show you more about that in a second. The camera, of course, slides in the back like this. And the door just close out like that and then clip the clip over it to make it waterproof. I don't test underwater abilities in these cameras. I don't do any water sport type things, so that's for other people to test out, I'm afraid. Now we'll switch the switch on here, push it to the front. As you can see, the camera switches on and also starts recording in one go. You don't have to turn the camera on and all that kind of stuff. And similarly, if you switch the camera, or switch the switch I should say, to the back, the camera switches off and stops recording. Now how's that going to work? Well, it's going to be a magnet, I'd imagine. So let's tap a magnet to the top and see what happens. As you can see, the camera is indeed starting up and starting recording. So yeah, there's a magnet inside that little switch on the case. Now that could be useful, that feature, for some kind of hobbyist. All they have to do is have a magnet touch to the top of the camera to start the camera recording. Don't know what you could use it for, but some people might like that idea. Now, if you put the camera inside the case, we've had another case on the SJ1000 that had vignetting on the early models, so you could see the edges of it, but you can't on this camera, which is nice, of course. Now, I'm going to show you some test footage. Now remember, of course, if you want to see the true quality, download something, because YouTube just messes everything up. But this is what 1080p looks like on YouTube from the footage that I've shot in the camera. Now, as you can see, that's the field of view. Let's go over to 720p to see the difference. And 720p again is wider. It's one of these cameras that has a wider field of view in 720p. I know it's counterintuitive, but it's not unusual in cameras like this. The weather was very changeable over the few weeks I was testing this camera, but the camera coped very well in all conditions. Whether it was dark or bright, it's fine regardless. Look how you can see the clouds as well as the ground in this shot. A lot of cameras can't cope with doing that, they get the exposure wrong. Now look at the detail in this one, the brickwork, the buildings in the background, and of course it's sharp from edge to edge, as well as the water at the bottom is nice and sort of shiny and ripply. And that's because it doesn't have a high compression. I've got the compression set to the high bit rate, which means that it doesn't make things blocky or crush things down. It keeps all the detail in a scene. Now if you go indoors, sometimes cameras just make everything a kind of yellowy tinge, but as you can see with this camera, I'm getting a good broad spectrum of colours on the camera, despite the fact we're under quite dull lighting here. Now just listen to the sound for a second though. That annoying high-pitched whistle comes on the soundtrack when things are quiet and the auto gain control tries to up the volume level and therefore picks up some sort of electrical interference. When things are a bit noisier, you don't notice it as much. Now, some of you will have already seen the next clip in my channel, but for those that haven't, you're in for a treat. I did warn you. Now let's just have a listen to how the sound is affected by the waterproof case. I'm pretty sure I was spotted by our tambourine shaking friend there, but as far as the sound goes, when you put the camera in the case and close the back door, Very little sound gets through, as you'd expect. Being a waterproof case, it's also airproof, and therefore the sound doesn't really travel through it. I didn't get a chance to try it out on the motorcycle. I'd imagine if I was out on the bike, I'd better hear a little bit of background noise, perhaps some engine noise, not much else. But unfortunately, every time it got to the weekend, the weather was so terrible I couldn't get the bike out again. But as you can see, the weather during the week, as is always the case, is nice and sunny. Unfortunately, this pig doesn't seem to be enjoying it very much. The camera copes very well with bright light. Look at the background where Debenhams is at the top of the building. You can still make out the windows on the side of it. A lot of cameras would just bleach that out as a big white blob. Now, one thing I need to point out, look at the bottom right of the screen. Notice what's missing. Yes, there's no timestamp. I switched the timestamp off for these clips. I wanted to point that out because people always ask, can you switch the timestamp off? And obviously, yes, you can, because it's not there at the moment. I'll show you that later on in the menus. Another thing I want to point out, look at the 720p here, how the fisheye effect gives you this kind of weird perspective. Everything goes very bulgy, like looking through a ball really as it's turning around. The 1080p, of course, having less wide angle, doesn't have as marked effect when you do that. So I tend to shoot in 1080p, you get a better quality image, but also you don't get that kind of bulgy effect either. Another couple of bright sunshiny clips now. Just wanted to show you the difference again quickly in the field of view between 1080p that you're looking at now and 720p that you're looking at now. You can also see my shadow at the bottom right there, next to that tree, like a bit of a weird spectre overlooking the scene. Now I just wanted to show you the difference again between bright and dark. So look at this, outside, nice and sunny, everything's nice and clear. We'll just pop in through this door here, and notice how quick the camera can adjust to the difference in brightness. That's very good. A lot of cameras take a lot longer than that. Now, one of the claims the camera makes is that it's got particularly brilliant low light ability. Let's have a look at that. Well, as you can see, it's not particularly brilliant. It's okay. I've seen worse, but I've seen better as well. It's mediocre, perhaps sort of slightly above average. Good thing about it, though, you can still see the colours in the scene. It's probably a pretty accurate representation of what was going on. It's not gaining up the brightness at all, but I have seen less grainy and brighter low-light footage than this in other cameras. Now, earlier on I demonstrated the mounts for putting it in your car to use it as a car dash camera. Now, I didn't mount it properly myself. I mounted it upside down and I flipped the video in post-production, which is why the timestamp's upside down. Obviously, you don't have to do this. You can put the camera the right way up if you use the mounts properly. However, I wouldn't use this as a car camera because I had a bit of an issue. The things that worked fine were that it records 1-minute clips, it records them until the card's full, it then rewrites over the oldest one. There's no gap between the clips either. But the problem that I had was that it wouldn't auto start and stop when it had power applied to it. Now, I don't know if that's a limitation of the camera or something wrong with mine or my car or whatever, but I wouldn't bother using this one because you can get cheaper car cameras than this that provide just as good a performance as this. I'd keep this one for use as an action camera or a helmet camera. And to finish off this section of the video, I'll just show you some photos that I snapped with the camera while I was out and about. Now, these aren't half bad, actually. Of course, you've got that noticeable fisheye effect and the 4:3 ratio, but they're nice and sharp and clear. Not bad at all, really. Now, we'll move on to the next section, which is looking at the menus and settings in the camera. I know this bit's normally a bit painful, but I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. There aren't too many things to change in this camera. The first one is you can change between sport mode and car mode. Sport mode just works like a normal action camera, starts and stops when you start and stop it. Car mode, of course, records 1-minute clips and loops them round when the card's full. Now, the next thing is playback, and then there's settings. We'll go through these settings. First one is the photos. Of course, you can change the different resolutions of the photos. I stuck to 5 megapixels because I think that's the native one. And then you've got the capture mode. Now, the top one on there is fast. That will take 30 photos in a burst mode, which is quite a lot, really. It looks like this. And then the other options are to take a photo every 30 seconds or every 2 minutes automatically. Now, in the video settings, we've got the resolution, 1080p 30, 720p 60 and 720p 30 are your choices in there. And then if we go into the bitrate, that's where we select how high we want the bitrate, high, medium and low. Remember, I recorded everything in high and I showed you the different amounts for the bitrates earlier on in the video. Now, the system type, we select between PAL and NTSC, but on this camera, it's got a good feature here. Put it into PAL, it does actually become a proper PAL camera. Notice we go back in the resolutions, we've now got 1080p 25, 720p 50 and 720p 25. That is something that a lot of people in PAL territories like because it enables them to match it in with other video footage they've shot. Date and time, obviously select the date and time there, but that's where you turn on and off the timestamp if you want it on your footage or not. Languages, got some nice flags here just to demonstrate what your different languages are. There's only 6 of them. The audio input is basically turn the mic on or off. And then at the bottom right, the last one we've got is to format the card. And that's it. That's all the settings in the camera. A lot of the sort of more stupid settings have just been removed from this one. It's just got the things that you actually need to get by. Now, in playback mode, you can obviously go through the different clips you've recorded earlier on, photos or videos, select each one of them. They'll play back on the screen, nice and clear. The sound comes out of the bottom there where the speaker was, just below the lens. You can't adjust the volume as far as I can make out, and you can't switch it off either. So if you're playing something back, be sure that you're not annoying anyone. Now, the other thing that I want to show you, the last thing, the remote control. 3 buttons on this. We've got record, stop and photo. It's an RF remote and it's got little sort of strap holes on the back there, so you could attach it to a piece of clothing or around your arm or something. And of course there were a couple of straps provided that might be useful for that. It won't turn on the camera. You notice you've got a little red light at the top there. You have to actually turn the camera on first. But once you've got the camera turned on, then it will work straight away. Notice you've got a nice loud beep there. It's the only time the camera does that beep is when you use the remote control, which is probably a pretty clever idea because you could stick it on your helmet and you'll be able to tell when the camera started and stopped recording. Now, there's an elephant in the room here we haven't spoken about yet. It's the Sony action camera. It's the fact that the SVC200 looks very similar in design to the Sony camera, but there's pros and cons for both of them. Now, the SVC has an LCD colour screen on the side. It's got a flat base and a tripod screw mount, and it does high megabits a second, so it doesn't get blocky. But the Sony, on the other hand, has image stabilisation. It's got more mounts and accessories, and it's got an excellent low light ability. In size, the cameras are pretty much the same as one another, but the main difference is, of course, the price. The Sony is £175 and the SVC200 is under £100. But they are quite different cameras, so I don't think they should really be compared head to head too much. Now, the SVC200, I did mention it has that tripod screw on the bottom. That is particularly useful because it means you can use lots of different accessories. The Sony doesn't have that on the bottom of the camera itself. Also, the Sony can't stand up on its own. The SVC200 has a mic in socket on the back behind a rubber flap, but on the Sony it's underneath the bottom behind a plastic flap, although you still can't access the one on the back of the SVC200, of course, when it's in its waterproof case. Now, the next thing I tested was the HDMI out capabilities of the camera. You have to provide your own lead, but the camera will do live streaming, as you can see now. I'm just going to press the record button and you'll see the red dot at the top, so you can record and do live streaming and charge at the same time. You can also get into all the menus on the camera, and of course you can get into the playback menus and playback things you've recorded earlier on, both your photos and your videos. You do get a bit of a overlay on the screen there as far as icons and things go, but it works nice and clearly. One thing I did notice when I plugged it in the television was how close the camera can get to things and still maintain a focus. I mean, it's about sort of 8 to 10 centimetres away here. It's got a nice sharp focus on it, which is a lot closer than a lot of these cameras. One thing about that LCD screen on the camera, though, it isn't as intuitive as you'd imagine. If you stand sideways onto things when you're filming them and then try and adjust the camera to follow, it's very tricky. It's a bit like playing a sort of computer game where your controls have been reversed. So it's good for framing things on the side of helmets or on tripods and things, but don't try and follow things when you're out and about. You'll just blow your mind. The main thing I like about this camera is the microphone in socket on the back and the way that you can access it even when the door's closed. Pity it's not 3.5mm though. The video quality on this camera is excellent. It's got high megabit rates. It means it doesn't get blocky, nice and sharp, clear, edge to edge, brilliant stuff. The controls on it, easy to understand as well, nice and simply laid out. The only downside perhaps is the sound. You get that whine on the sound when it gets quiet, which is a bit annoying. So on the positive side, we've got the price and the size, the video quality being excellent. It's got that tripod mount on the bottom, standard tripod screw, a mic in socket. The LCD screen on the side is very useful at times, and it's got a nice, simple operation. But on the negative side, we've got that whine that's on the audio, that kind of whistly sound. It's got a 2.5mm mic jack, would have preferred 3.5. The sideways LCD is a little bit hard to use at times. It's got that weird clips on the side that look like it should mount to something, but they didn't give you any mounts for it. And the car car mode on mine didn't work for the auto start and stop. But overall, despite any of those things, I've got to reiterate, this is the best £100 action camera that I've tested so far, and if you want to download some clips, I suggest you do so from my blog. They look a lot better than the ones I've shown you on YouTube. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.